All right, guys, the UFC welterweight division is currently in one of its wildest and most exciting times, with a new champion just crowned, a sea of contenders, and the return of Nate Diaz looming ahead. And so we figured, who better to discuss it with than the man who started it all and was the first to hold the UFC welterweight belt, the UFC Hall of Famer himself. Pat Miletich returns to the program. Pat, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me, bud.
Well, yeah, Pat, welcome to the program. Now, before we talk about everything welterweight, we saw you getting ready for something called the Leadville Run. Now, for people removed from the action here in Australia, can you explain what exactly does this run entail, and how long have you been preparing for it?
All right, first of all, not to be offensive, but we have to fix your accent.
But what's that saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, Pat?
There's a few. What aspects of the accent would?
Well, in America we call it the Leadville 100 because Leadville was known for its mining, which a lot of it was iron ore and lead. So they pulled a lot of lead out of the ground. So, but the Leadville 100 basically. And I'm obviously just joking because I love Aussies.
yeah, of course.
Aussie women. But anyway, the Leadville 100 is a 100-mile race. You go out 50 miles, turn around and come back 50 miles. But the problem is, obviously 100 miles is very difficult.
Yeah.
There's no real resting. There's no sitting down. There's no sleeping, any of that. It's not like it's in stages. You just keep moving. But more than anything, it's 2 miles up in altitude or higher, and the air is about 30% less than where I live, or I would say 30% less oxygen, or 30% oxygen from where I live. So if you were at 800-foot altitude in Australia, at 100% oxygen levels, you would be at 30% at Leadville. I don't know.
It just keeps getting worse and worse.
There's just no oxygen, basically.
So I guess the question is, why would somebody want to put themselves through something like that? 100 miles, no oxygen. Why are you doing it, Pat?
Well, I lived a life of intensity, I guess. I'm addicted to adrenaline. I love chasing tornadoes. I love flying planes. I love mixed martial arts fighting. I've always, for some reason, found the things that gave me adrenaline dumps, and I enjoy doing things that scare me a lot. So I guess the thing that scares me the most is combating myself for 100 miles at 2 miles altitude, and so that's what I did. And I've got several friends that do that race. They're very good at it. They're ultra marathon freaks, and so I thought, let me jump on your coattails, jump in with you, and have fun, and let's do this thing.
That is a hell of a respectable thing. I mean, me and Dennis struggle to run 1 mile. Let alone 100. And if we did that,
you speak for yourself. I've run 2 miles before.
I would probably take like some kind of.
That's good.
It was a cold day. Right. I felt motivated, Pat. Had good music on. Have
you done anything like this before, Pat, or is this going to be a first for you? Are you climbing Mount Everest first time?
No, here's the thing: is I started training September of last year, and at that time I would run about 3 miles and would be basically crippled for about 2 or 3 days. I would do my best to come back and train again. But what I found out was, in America here, and I'm sure that some Australians have heard, that we have a thing called genetically modified organisms. That is the GMOs, the grains. I don't know. I don't think it's legal in Australia, right? Or is it?
I'm not too sure, but I have heard of them. That's about all I can say.
We have weird organic stores, Pat, so I'm pretty sure it's happening here.
Yeah. Okay, so wheat and soy products contain genetically modified organisms, meaning there's a protein added called gluten, which adversely affects the human body. and it's in literally everything we eat, okay? So I'd had 3 forms of arthritis, respiratory problems, stomach problems, and even to be honest with you, the guy that did the blood tests on me and when the results came back asked me how my temper had been lately. And when I told him that, I've had a bit of a temper lately for the past couple of years, he said, okay, well, now that it has affected your brain, that's the last step. The next step is you're going to have a heart attack. You'll be dead within 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so the problem with genetically modified grains is they don't belong in our bodies. Anything processed, anything with a label on it, should not be put in your body. So what I would advise all Australians to do is buy fresh vegetables and meats and fish and poultry and strictly consume that, because the effects that it was doing, that it was having on me was basically killing me. Okay, I was 225 pounds and miserable, and when I quit it, it took about a week for all of my problems to go away. And so my respiratory cleared up, my arthritis cleared up, every problem that I had, and then, now I can go out and run 75 miles, wake up the next day and have zero pain.
Wow.
Do you sort of wish that you knew that during your fighting career, when you were fighting?
Yeah, cause, the probably the last, when you're young, your body can bounce back, right?
Mm.
But toward my late 30s, 40s, things started to go off the rails, and the body doesn't regenerate quite as easily, obviously. And I found out real quick that I was not invincible. But now at 50 years old, because I'm not eating gluten, I can almost do anything. There's no way in hell at 25 years old I could go out and run 75 miles. I just couldn't do it. And now I can go out and run 75 miles and actually wake up the next day and get on a plane and go do a broadcast and have no problems.
Wow. It's Pat Miletich 2.0. Now, Pat, we want to have a chat with you about some of the exciting things happening in the welterweight division. But before we jump to it, I just want to quickly find out, obviously the division has a lot of exciting talent, a lot of big names. Does a part of you sort of wish you were around fighting in this day and age of the welterweight division? Are there any names that sort of pop out when you watch them and you go, oh man, I wish I was around as an active fighter right now, because this guy would be so much fun to fight?
I've never really put much thought into that. I mean, at this point in my life, it seems like a different life altogether. Obviously, I've trained law enforcement and military for probably 20 years. I have a company called Fire Horse Combatives, and we've trained everybody from local, state, federal law enforcement all the way up to SEAL Team 6, and had our fun, and it's an amazing experience. So I get my adrenaline dumps in other ways, but no, there's really nobody out there now that I would say, yes, I would love to fight, anything like that. And I don't regret anything that I ever did. I reached all my goals as a fighter and as a coach. So that part of my life is done, and I'm fine. And I love watching the fights. I love calling the fights, and I'm perfectly content with where I'm at.
Mm-mm-mm. Well, I mean, speaking of active fighters, a fighter that you obviously know very well is Robbie Lawler. There's been a lot going on as late in the division, with Tyron Woodley obviously shocking the MMA community and beating Robbie to become the champion. We've got to get your thoughts, Pat. What did you make of that fight? And, much like many of us, did you believe that Robbie was going to beat him?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. When I started calling Tyron Woodley's fights on CBS Showtime, which is a very big network here in the United States, I said that if I were to be able to be God and build the perfect prototype fighter, it would be Tyron Woodley. Okay, and I said that years ago. And he's a very intelligent guy. He's an amazing athlete. He's a good-looking guy. He's well-spoken. He's bright. he's very marketable. So he is a perfect example of the ideal mixed martial artist, right? So, having said that, people were asking my advice or my idea on how the fight would go, and I said if Tyron is going to get Rob, he's going to have to get him early because Tyron is very explosive. He's all fast twitch muscle, and the longer the fight goes, the more tired Tyron gets. And if Tyron doesn't get him early, he's not going to get him. And I think his camp knew that, with Duke Rufus being his coach, his striking coach. Duke, I'm sure, advised him, look, get on Rob early, try and hurt him, and use feints and fakes. And Rob bit on a fake and wasn't paying attention and got clipped with a big right hand and got hurt. That's, both those guys, Rob and Tyron, both, if they hit you with a solid shot, you're going to get hurt. And Rob did not see the punch coming. It was very clear his peripheral vision was not there, and did not see it coming and got clipped and got put down. And Rob was very coherent when he got up and did the interview, knew exactly what happened, and said, I'll go back to the drawing board. I made a mistake, and I bit on a feint, and Tyron caught me with the right hand, and it is what it is. Both, guys at that level, guys with that power, explosiveness, you just don't take a 4-ounce glove with their hand in it and walk away.
Obviously, a tough loss for Robbie, but yeah, he handled it like a champion. Curious, did you get a chance to speak to him after the fight at all, or on the phone or anything like that, and to sort of gauge how he's doing after the loss?
He's fine. He's fine. And I don't bug guys. The guys that I've trained in the past, I don't bug them. I just tell them I love them, and that's really what it comes down to. And they know that I'm thinking about them, and they're leading their lives. He's taking care of his wife and his kid and doing his thing. I just let him know I care about him and thinking about him, and that's really what it comes down to. I don't have long, drawn-out conversations with guys about what they did right or what they did wrong. That's our coach's job now. I do not take that role and stay away from really all of that.
A lot of people obviously wondering how much longer Robbie will be fighting for, seeing as he's had huge wars and he's had a very long career. He's been in the sport for a very long time. Do you think it's possible that we'll see him become the UFC welterweight champion once more before he retires?
You know what? I'd be willing to bet that he will. I mean, I would definitely put money on that. When Matt Hughes became the world champion for the first time, he had lost a couple fights in a row and had basically retired and was on a corn combine back home on the farm in southern Illinois, here in the middle of the United States. And I called him and said, "You're fighting for the title that I had just lost." And he said, "No, that's your title." He knew I had an automatic rematch clause in my contract, but I said, "They're not allowing that, but they're willing to let you take the shot at Carlos Newton, and you can come back and do it if you want." And we argued for about 45 minutes, and he came back and did it, won the world title, made I think a 3-year run, lost the title to BJ, then came back, beat BJ, and made another 2-year run before St-Pierre took it from him. So, guys, there is definitely something in the water, and Rob's a winner through and through, and I think he'll be invigorated by it when he goes back and licks his wounds. He'll come back and be better than ever.
Just quickly, Pat, on that, it's an infamous story where the UFC sort of got you to go up to middleweight, I believe, and Matt got that welterweight shot. Why exactly didn't they let you have that automatic rematch? Because a lot of fans are sort of confused as to why they didn't give you an opportunity to win that title back straight away.
Well, the deal was they called me and they said, "Okay, Las Vegas, you and Carlos Newton in the rematch." And I said, "Absolutely." Hung up the phone, so I just basically assumed that I was going to be fighting Carlos for the rematch in Las Vegas. Then they called me back later that day and said, "Okay, we just discovered a problem. The main event, co-main event fights are you and Carlos Newton and Randy Couture and Pedro Hizzo, the exact same co-main event that happened in New Jersey at the Trump Taj Mahal, and we don't want to look like we don't have enough athletes, and that was their lame excuse. But it was basically, we'll give you the option. Either you can put Matt Hughes in your spot, or we're going to pick a fighter from another camp to come in and fight Carlos, and then you can have the winner. Well, when you put a coach, I'm the coach of Matt Hughes at the time, and I promised Matt I'd make him a world champ. I knew that Matt could beat Carlos, and so when they put that ball in my lap, I said, you know what, I've got to do the right thing. I promised Matt I'd make him a world champ. Let's put Matt in that slot, and if Matt loses, which I don't think he's going to, but if he loses, then I'll come back and I'll beat Carlos and take the title back. And so that's the way history went. And once Matt came back and won the title, basically what I said to the company was, look, I'll be the gatekeeper. I don't ever need to be world champion again. I'm fine with playing second fiddle. And they said, no, you've already trained yourself out of that weight division. You have Rob Lawler, Matt Hughes, and Jason Black, who are all ranked in the top 10 in the world. You've basically coached yourself out of a weight division. So either go up to 185 or we're going to cut you. And I walked around at like 190. So I'm not big enough for that weight division. So by the time I got in, basically it was, by the time I got in the cage against Matt Lindland, my soul had basically been taken already. I really didn't care anymore at that point. And that's just being honest.
Yeah.
Had I been at 170, I'd had fun being the gatekeeper and fighting the young and up-and-comers and beating some guys up. But things were essentially done at that point just because I had no control anymore.
Wow. I'm just wondering, you mentioned before that the UFC used that lame excuse about not having the same two obviously fights back-to-back. What do you think the real reason was? Because it seemed pretty clear that they wanted you out of that division.
Well, either way, it doesn't, hindsight's 20/20, but it really doesn't matter.
Right. Sure.
Ultimately, I think that, my talks with Dana White previously, I spoke very highly of Matt. I spoke about, his potential to dominate that division and be a star, and they probably took that and ran with it, which is fine,
Well, jumping back to 2016, and now the big question is who exactly Tyron should fight next. He's mentioned wanting to fight Nate Diaz or George St-Pierre, and then, of course, there's Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's the actual #1 contender. Pat, if you were in the matchmaker's shoes, who do you give the next title shot to out of those three?
Well, I'm going to give it to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. If I'm Tyron Woodley, I want to fight George St-Pierre and make big money, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that Tyron has a good shot against him, given that George has been out for several years. Nick Diaz cannot stop Tyron's takedowns, so Tyron can control him. But Wonderboy, I tell you what, Wonderboy's going to give him fits. That is a tough fight, and if Tyron is fighting guys like that, and a couple of the other guys in the division that he's going to have trouble with striking-wise, who can wrestle, he may run into some problems. And like I say, matchups really make fights. And there's certain guys that Tyron matches up with very well, and certain guys he does not match up with.
I mean, we don't buy into the idea that Tyron is afraid of facing Stephen Wonderboy Thompson or any of the division's best, but the current debate is, if champions choose big paydays over facing the #1 contenders and the best in their division, does this hurt the sport and its integrity in any way? Where do you stand on that, Pat?
Well, that's where a sanctioning body needs to be established, a global sanctioning body that is a non-profit organization where pay your officers well, make it a non-profit, get corporate sponsors for the belts, and make the best fight the best. And with it being non-profit, it can't be corrupted nearly as bad as boxing has been corrupted. And that's where you're going to get the best fights, right? And then along with the Ali Act being enacted in the sport. Now, people with money can bid for athletes, and the athletes are going to get the money they deserve, and they won't have the champions clauses and all the other garbage that would get laughed out of any other professional sports negotiating room. So there's things that need to happen in the sport to improve the sport, to take it to the next level, and it's going to happen. It's just when.
Well, Tyron is obviously choosing GSP and Nick Diaz because of the monetary benefits that each big money fight brings. And this seems like a very new age mentality compared to the past. Fighters are now putting money and paydays before titles. Just curious, Pat, when you were competing, what was your primary goal? The glory of becoming champion or choosing the fight that makes the most money?
Well, the belt was most important, and two, I fought who the company told me to fight. And that's really what my entire camp did. I mean, we had 90 guys make it to televised careers, and I think, depending on how you look at it, 11 to 14 world champions. And none of my guys ever turned down a fight. They fought who they were told to fight, and that's the way we did business. So, but having said that, if Tyron Woodley can go out and make $10 million fighting George St-Pierre, hey, you know what? He's the guy with the belt. If he can call the shots, do you blame him for taking care of his family? No.
Looking at some of the other options, I mean, Woodley mentioned that Wonderboy should fight Robbie Lawler next. If Stephen Thompson doesn't get his title shot like yourself and many other people believe he should, do you think he should fight again, or is that a bit too risky?
Well, if I'm Stephen Thompson, I'm going to sit back and say, you know what, I'm the number one contender. I'm not going to fight until I get a title shot, period. I'll let my contract run out. I don't even care. You've got to know where you've got leverage, and Stephen Thompson needs to be the squeaky wheel that gets grease. He needs to start talking smack. He needs to understand his position of power to a certain extent, and I think that he could probably end up in the position he wants to be if he plays it right.
He's such a nice guy. I've had him on the show multiple times. He is just the ultimate gentleman. Do you think that kind of hurts him in and his marketability just slightly in today's MMA, where it's all about the big personalities?
Well, in today's society, look, I mean, come on, rappers and the Kardashians in America get a ton of attention, and so basically, thugs and hookers get all the attention, but
yeah.
which is pretty disturbing. Can Thompson put a little edge on it at least? Yes, he could. He could say, look, Tyron Woodley's ducking me. He knows I'm going to knock him out. That's just the way it is. I'm going to take his title. He'll have the shortest reign as champion, and I'll take it from him. And he knows it. He's ducking me. He's trying to fight George St-Pierre, who's past his prime, and Nick Diaz, who he can take down easier than my sister, and that's what he's doing. He's looking for easy paydays. He's afraid of me, and he needs to understand how to talk and pump things up.
Well, in a couple of weeks' time, Conor McGregor is fighting Nate Diaz at UFC 202, and of course the bout takes place at welterweight. There were some talks a while ago of him moving all the way up to welterweight and maybe even fighting Robbie Lawler for the belt. If he's able to beat Nate Diaz at 170, what do you think that says about his chances against the best there? And do you think he can have the success? He can have success at welterweight?
No, he's going to get his ass beat by Nate again. And even if he were to get lucky and beat Nate, he fights guys that cut down from, you know, some of the guys at 170 are cutting down from 210, 215 pounds. I mean, you're talking skull fractures from punches from guys like that. I mean, the 170 pounders who walk around at 200 plus could punch a heavyweight and break his jaw and knock him out. So these are explosive, very strong guys who, if Conor McGregor even remotely attempts to take them down, he's going to get shut down. And if he gets hit with a three-punch combo, is going to the hospital. So, you know, I tell you what, though, I will say this. Conor McGregor has sold the sport. He's sold himself. I think he's brought some of the Chael Sonnen WWE from Ireland into it, which is great. And, more power to him. I love the guy, actually.
But obviously you don't see him winning at UFC 202. You see Nate picking up the victory. How do you think he does it? He did it in less than 2 rounds last time around. Do you think it's going to be quicker, shorter? How do you think it's going to play out, Pat?
Oh, I think Conor's going to come in very motivated, bigger, stronger, and but he's not going to be able to hurt Nate. And look, dude, I'm training for a 100-mile run in 2 miles altitude, right? The Diaz brothers do stuff like that on a regular basis. You cannot get them tired. You cannot hurt them. What can Conor McGregor do to Nate Diaz that doing a 50-mile or 75-mile run can't do to him? There's something different that happens mentally, and I'm learning that now, where training for a fight and getting in a cage is honestly, now when I look back on things, is kind of a joke.
Wow, so
you go.
Go on.
I was just going to say, a joke in what way?
The mind games that you play with yourself. When you go to war with yourself when you're running for 24 hours straight, and the demons that you deal with out on a country road in the middle of nowhere while you're running in 95-degree heat. I'm talking Fahrenheit. You guys are Celsius, but 95-degree heat with 95% humidity, and you've already been running for 60 miles, and you've got 20, 30, 40 more to go. Outsmarting another human being, intimidating them, and beating their asses is really not that tough. I can tell you that right now. Had I been doing this stuff during my career, fighting would have been so much easier. So much easier.
Wow.
Yeah, we would have seen Pat Miletich in the Olympics doing the big marathon and then winning the UFC welterweight title. Now, Pat, before
obviously that's in jest to a certain extent, but I mean, I was running 3 miles in 16 minutes when I was in my prime. I could fly.
Wow.
But running 50 miles and up, there's something different that happens to you mentally. Physically, of course, there's massive amounts of abuse, but mentally you become a different person. You become a different animal, and there's no amount of pain that you can't withstand.
Wow.
Well, before we let you go, Pat, I really appreciate the time. But for the fans listening right now, what else is going on that they could tune into? What else should they be looking out for? We know you're doing some great commentary work, but is there anything coming out soon the fans should be keeping an eye out for?
Well, I'm doing fire horse combatives. We're training law enforcement and military. We've trained law enforcement and military all over the world, so we'd love to come to Australia and train the police there and the military. It's very high level. We've trained everybody from, like I said, local, state, and federal departments all the way up to the elite special forces here in the United States. And so I'd love to come there, and then also have my podcast, which is called The Conspiracy Farm. We talk about everything that the mainstream media will not educate the people on. So all the bullshit that's going on, we're opening up people's eyes, and if people go to, even the people in Australia can go to YouTube and punch up The Conspiracy Farm, listen to our podcast, and then do research for themselves, and they'll say, wow, these guys actually know what they're talking about, because the mainstream media is feeding everyone full of shit, and we're here to expose them and help the citizens educate themselves on what's really going on.
And Pat, is this a weekly podcast? How often does it come out and what days?
We do it weekly, but we've held off because I'm training for the Leadville 100. The training's been pretty grueling, so things have slowed down on that. We'll pick it back up beginning of September on a weekly basis. Every Tuesday we'll release a new podcast, and I think people will find it very interesting, very educational. And a lot of politicians, actually, in the United States have started messaging me saying that they're listening to my podcast and being educated by my podcast.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Well, we'll have to have a listen, Pat, and
good,
bring up
good.
a few of the theories next time we get you back on the show to really have a chat about it. Guys, make sure to follow Pat on Twitter at Pat Miletich. Best of luck in the race. We're curious to see how you do, Pat, and also we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, guys, I appreciate it. And sorry for sounding loopy, but I just got done running about 25 miles, so I'm a little out of it.
Man, that's totally fine. We respect the fact that you're willing to do the interview and obviously give us so much of your time after running 25 miles. So, again, thank you so much, Pat. We'll definitely speak to you in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Take care.